The Young and the Restless spoilers next 2-week full October 6th to October 17th. At Abbott Manor, the evening had grown heavier than anyone expected. Diane Jenkins could feel the walls of tension pressing in as she watched her husband retreat deeper into silence. Jack Abbott's frustration had become almost ritual lately, a mixture of paternal disappointment and protective rage that Diane understood but no longer agreed with. She had tried to be patient, but tonight she finally said what had been building inside her for weeks. They were being too hard on their son. Kyle had made mistakes, yes, but so had everyone in that family. The difference was that his errors were being magnified under the weight of their expectations and their own unhealed wounds. Diane's voice trembled slightly as she told Jack that the tighter they tried to control Kyle, the further he would drift away. Jack didn't want to hear it. He had always believed that strength came from structure, from setting boundaries, but Diane knew that sometimes love demanded forgiveness before it demanded rules. Deep down, she feared they were repeating the same cycles that had destroyed their family once before, and the price this time might be permanent. Jack had been under immense pressure lately, and Diane understood that too. His company, his family, and his conscience were all being pulled in different directions. With Victor Newman's shadow looming again, and whispers of Kane Ashby re-emerging as a serious threat, Jack's ability to balance loyalty with reason was being tested. His alliance with Victor had always been uneasy, a necessary evil to contain a bigger problem, but even Diane could see that the partnership was poisoning him. She didn't trust Victor, not after everything he had done to the Abbotts over the years. But she knew Jack felt cornered. Kane had become more than just a nuisance. He was a variable that neither Jabot nor Newman could afford to underestimate. And yet, as Diane watched her husband's eyes darken with exhaustion, she wondered if the real danger wasn't outside at all, but within, among the people who thought they were fighting to save their families. Elsewhere in Genoa City, another conversation was unfolding under the same uneasy air. At the Newman Ranch, Victor Newman sat across from his daughter, Victoria, his expression unreadable as ever. The fire beside them flickered against the walls, reflecting the unspoken strain between father and daughter. They had gone over Kane Ashby's name several times in the past few weeks, but tonight, the tone was different. Victor's patience had worn thin. He told Victoria that he was done waiting for Kane to make the next move. He had information, powerful information, about Colin Atkinson, Kane's father, and he intended to use it. He didn't elaborate on how he acquired it, but Victoria didn't have to ask. Her father had spent decades mastering the art of quiet coercion, and she knew that whatever Victor possessed, it was enough to strike at Kane's very foundation. He explained that he planned to expose Colin's past dealings on every Newman platform, effectively cutting Kane off from his remaining supporters and financial backers. Victoria shifted uneasily, recognizing the familiar tone in her father's voice, the one he used when he had already decided to destroy someone. She had seen it before with Adam, with Jack, with anyone who dared to defy him. But this time, the target was unpredictable. Kane wasn't the type to retreat or negotiate, he was the type to retaliate. Victoria reminded her father that escalating this could invite consequences none of them could control. But Victor brushed it aside with that cold confidence that had both defined and cursed him. He said Genoa City needed a reminder of who truly held power. In his mind, Kane had crossed a line, and the only way to restore order was to crush him publicly. Victoria sighed, knowing there was no talking him down once he had chosen a path. She knew this fight would bleed into every corner of their lives, their businesses, their families, their peace. At the same time, in a quieter part of the city, Sharon Newman sat in her living room, scrolling through messages that only deepened her concern. Nick was supposed to be packing for Los Angeles, where they were both expected for a meeting related to Noah's new nightclub project, but he hadn't confirmed his flight. When the phone finally buzzed, the news wasn't what she hoped for. Nick's voice came through with a familiar weight, a mix of responsibility and regret. Victor had summoned him to the ranch, meaning he might not make the flight at all. Sharon's heart sank. She knew that when Victor called, everything else became secondary. But she also sensed something deeper. The timing was too convenient. She told Nick that she didn't believe the nightclub story Noah had told them, at least not the whole of it. There was something hidden beneath the surface, something Noah was protecting or hiding, and she could feel it in her gut. Sharon had always been intuitive, her instincts shaped by years of surviving chaos, loss, and heartbreak. This time, her intuition screamed that something was wrong. She confessed that she was even more worried about Mariah Copeland. Mariah had recently checked herself into a facility in Boston for treatment, claiming she needed space and clarity, but Sharon couldn't shake the fear that it was more serious than her daughter had let on. The thought of missing the trip, of not being there when things unfolded, filled her with dread. She told Nick that if he missed the flight, she feared he might never get to Los Angeles at all, that fate would intervene in ways neither of them could predict. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Victor's plans were accelerating. When Nick finally arrived, the tone shifted immediately. Victor wasted no time. He told his son that they were on the brink of a full-scale war with Kane Ashby. The language was blunt, the message unmistakable. Kane had crossed from being a nuisance to being a declared enemy. Victor revealed that he was using Jack Abbott as part of a false alliance, a front designed to trap Kane into overplaying his hand. The plan was ruthless but strategic. Newman and Jabot, appearing united, would draw Kane into negotiations that would expose his network of shell corporations. Once he was trapped, Victor would deliver the killing blow. Nick listened, but his unease grew with every word. He asked the question that no one else dared to ask: why provoke a man like Kane? Why escalate a war that could destroy families on both sides? Victor's response was as cold as it was predictable. Kane needed to learn that his threats had consequences. He needed to understand that Genoa City belonged to those who built it, not those who tried to steal it through deception. To Victor, this wasn't personal, it was about dominance, about ensuring that the Newman legacy remained untouchable. But to Nick, it sounded like history repeating itself. Every time Victor claimed to act in defense of the family, someone innocent ended up caught in the crossfire. Victoria, still standing nearby, broke her silence long enough to remind her father that their mother wouldn't approve of his manipulation of Jack. She knew Nicky would see it as a betrayal of trust, and she was right. Jack had spent years trying to escape Victor's influence, and now Victor was dragging him back in, not as an ally but as a pawn. Victor dismissed her concerns with a wave, saying the greater good justified temporary deception. But Victoria's eyes betrayed her doubt. She wasn't just worried about Kane, she was worried about the cost of her father's obsession. Outside, the night was quiet, but the storm was forming. Kane was already aware that Victor had moved against him. His sources had warned him days earlier, and instead of fear, it fueled his resolve. He had expected Victor's retaliation, in fact, he had counted on it. For every move Victor made, Kane had a countermeasure waiting. He knew the Newmans better than they knew themselves, their pride, their rivalries, their blind spots. And he had every intention of using those flaws to dismantle them piece by piece. Back in the city, Sharon sat alone, replaying Nick's words and the unease in his tone. She didn't realize that her worries were about to intertwine with the chaos Victor was creating. The nightclub in Los Angeles that Noah had been so secretive about wasn't just a business venture, it was a cover for something larger, something Kane might already have his hands in. Sharon's maternal instincts were right. The danger was not confined to Genoa City anymore, it was spreading outward, touching everyone connected to the Newmans and the Abbotts. By the time morning came, the air in Genoa City felt heavier, charged with invisible tension. Diane tried once more to convince Jack to give Kyle some space, unaware that the storm her husband was walking into extended far beyond their family. Victor was readying for battle, Victoria was preparing for damage control, Nick was torn between duty and instinct, and Sharon was bracing for heartbreak. Kane Ashby's name had become the thread that tied all their lives together, a name whispered with dread in boardrooms, living rooms, and even the quiet corners of the ranch. But what none of them fully understood yet was that Kane wasn't merely fighting for revenge. He was fighting to rewrite the balance of power in a city that had never given him the respect he believed he deserved. And as Victor tightened his grip on his empire and Jack unknowingly walked into a trap disguised as an alliance, the stage was being set for a war that would leave no family untouched. Genoa City was about to learn, once again, that power, once challenged, never retreats quietly. The sun hung low over Chancellor Park, casting golden light across the manicured paths and trimmed hedges that had witnessed countless whispered secrets and bruised confessions over the years. Today, it was Kyle Abbott and Audra Charles who carried their battle into this seemingly serene setting. The contrast between the tranquil park and the storm brewing between them was almost poetic. Kyle stood with his hands jammed in his pockets, jaw tight, eyes flicking from the ground to Audra as though trying to steady himself. He had rehearsed this conversation in his head, imagining how it might go, but as always with Audra, reality was unpredictable. She stood poised as ever, her expression a mix of indifference and a quiet dare, as if daring him to say what he really meant. Kyle's opening move was bold but shaky, the kind of grand gesture that might have worked on someone else but would only amuse Audra. He told her he could take her anywhere she wanted in the world, that his family's private jet could be ready within the hour. He added the bitter edge deliberately, as long as it's a one-way flight. He wanted it to sting, to feel like an exile disguised as generosity. But Audra's lips curved into a slow smile, the kind that revealed nothing and promised everything. She replied coolly that she could pay her own way, that if and when she decided to leave Genoa City, it would be on her own terms, not as some reluctant passenger on an Abbott jet. Her refusal wasn't just about the offer, it was about power. She wanted him to know she wasn't the kind of woman who could be dismissed with a ticket to anywhere. Kyle's frustration deepened. He had tried to come at this from angles of charm, threat, reason, and even nostalgia, but Audra remained a fortress. He warned her again, voice lower now, that if she knew what was good for her, she would disappear before someone else made that decision for her. It was an ominous hint, part protective, part accusatory. But Audra didn't flinch. Instead, she began to laugh softly, a sound that cut through Kyle's composure like glass. She told him he was a joke, not with malice but with a kind of pitying amusement. Then she went for the strike that she knew would hit him hardest. His girlfriend, she said, had just flown to Los Angeles with another man. She pointed across the park, her manicured finger landing on a scene that twisted Kyle's stomach, Claire Newman and Holden Novak, seated at a shaded table, sipping Vespers like a scene out of a romantic travel magazine. It was a perfectly timed blow, and Audra knew it. She had spent enough time in Genoa City to understand the art of psychological warfare. She told him that he was the cliché, not her. He was the one who tried to control narratives but couldn't control himself. She leaned in slightly, her voice velvet and steel all at once, telling him that if anyone needed to leave this town to start over, it was him. The words landed heavier than he expected. For a moment, Kyle saw himself as she framed him, not as the confident heir to Jabot, but as a man stumbling through the ruins of his own choices, blaming others for fires he had started. But pride flared in him before self-awareness could settle. He snapped back that Audra needed to own her mistakes, to stop spinning webs and pretending she wasn't part of the destruction she left behind. He was tired of being the one who lost everything while she walked away untouched. His voice cracked with something deeper than anger, it was desire, guilt, and a strange kind of resentment that he couldn't fully name. Audra, perceptive as ever, caught it immediately. She smiled, not cruelly but knowingly, and told him that he was just angry because he wanted her, and he hated himself for it. She called him out with surgical precision, saying that deep down he knew he was a lesser man than the image he tried to project, that his craving for women like her proved it. The air between them thickened as the words hung like smoke. Audra's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of saying what Kyle wouldn't dare admit aloud. She told him that they both knew what had almost happened between them in Nice, how close they had come to crossing a line that would have changed everything. She said it not as an accusation but as a reminder, a shard of truth he couldn't dodge. He remembered the hotel balcony, the quiet of the evening, the glass of wine in her hand, the way she had looked at him like a mirror reflecting all his flaws back at him. They had pulled back at the last moment, but the memory still burned like an ember neither of them had fully extinguished. Then she pressed on, her voice now softer but no less devastating. He would always find women like her more alluring than Summer or Claire, she said. Not because of love but because of what it represented. Danger, escape, the illusion of freedom from the expectations he hated. That was why both those relationships had failed. He was drawn to something he couldn't sustain, addicted to the tension between wanting and loathing, to the thrill of standing at the edge of ruin. She asked him, rhetorically, when he would finally accept who he really was. Kyle felt as though she had reached into his chest and pulled out a truth he had spent years denying. For so long, he had blamed others for the collapse of his relationships, Summer's indecision, Claire's secrets, the weight of his family legacy. But standing here, under Audra's unflinching gaze, he saw the pattern more clearly. He had been chasing a version of himself that didn't exist, trying to be the responsible heir while craving the chaos he pretended to despise. Audra wasn't just a temptation, she was a symptom of his own contradictions. He wanted to shout back, to dismantle her words with logic or indignation, but nothing came. Instead, he stared at her, his jaw set but his eyes betraying something softer, the look of a man who knew he had been seen. Audra didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in humiliating him but in exposing the fracture lines he refused to acknowledge. She had no interest in being his savior or his downfall. She was simply the mirror. Around them, the park continued its serene routine, joggers passed, a fountain splashed, children played in the distance, but for Kyle, the world had narrowed to this moment. He realized that sending Audra away wouldn't fix anything. She was right about one thing, the person who needed to leave, to start fresh, wasn't her. It was him. And not just physically leaving Genoa City, but leaving behind the version of himself that kept repeating the same mistakes. Audra watched him wrestle with the realization, her expression unreadable. She wasn't offering him redemption, she wasn't even offering him understanding. She was simply telling him the truth he had tried so hard to avoid. That was her parting gift, the sharp, unvarnished truth. Whether he would use it to change or to spiral further was entirely up to him. As she turned to go, Kyle felt the urge to stop her, to say something, anything that would reclaim his sense of control. But the words didn't come. For the first time in a long time, he had nothing left to argue. He watched her walk away, heels clicking against the cobblestone path, her silhouette dissolving into the crowd. Across the park, Claire and Holden laughed softly over their drinks, oblivious to the storm just a few yards away. Kyle felt a hollowness settle in his chest, a quiet echo of the choices he had made and the man he had become. He stayed there long after she disappeared, the golden light fading into twilight. Somewhere deep down, he knew Audra had just handed him the key to his own prison. Whether he would use it or not was a question for another day. For now, he was just a man standing alone in a park, confronted not by an adversary but by himself, and for the first time, the weight of that truth felt heavier than any rivalry or betrayal.